Hi guys, today I want to talk about electronic flight bags or EFBs. And to begin, just kind of start off with what the definition of electronic flight bag is. And most importantly, the FAA defines an electronic flight bag as any device or combination of devices actively displaying EFB applications. A typical EFB is going to be comprised of a tablet like an iPad and a application like ForeFlight. And kind of going back to the FAA definition, and that is PED or portable electronic device. So that would actually be an EFB that's comprised of something that wasn't originally like an iPad or a tablet. It wasn't necessarily designed to be an EFB, but because it has the app, the EFB app like ForeFlight on there, when the app is open, it now becomes an EFB. So real common, most pilots I know just use the iPad and the ForeFlight. There are other options out there, but I would go so far as to say that's probably the most common. So operation of the EFB, specifically, how does the EFB work? How does it get its information? It's a standalone system, and by definition, in order to use it, the only way you can really connect it to the aircraft is to charge the battery. So you're charging it through a USB port, or if you want to connect to an external GPS antenna, there's some regulations on how that external antenna has to be mounted, but those are the only ways you can that EFB can be in the aircraft. It has to be easily and readily removable by definition. So the way, if we just kind of stick to the iPad and the ForeFlight, just for the purpose of this demonstration, the iPad uses an internal GPS if it's properly equipped, and accelerometers that will help to determine pitch and roll for certain functions of the EFB. The internal GPS will give location, and there can be external sources, kind of we already went over. Another I guess external source is another portable device, ADS-B in receiver, and I know that this is something that I personally use so that I can have ADS-B weather and traffic advisories. And this is also a portable device, battery powered, not dependent on the aircraft for anything. And some of these ADS-B in receivers also have GPS capability. The one I use does not, but if you have an iPad that did not have that GPS capabilities, you can get that GPS source from the ADS-B in receiver. I hesitate to put this one up here, the cellular internet. Technically, yeah, you can. There's kind of debates on, I mean, if you're flying VFR, using cellular data, I mean, you have to kind of be careful when you're flying IFR what devices you're using. But really, once you get above, in my experience, about 3,000 feet or so, you're really not going to get very good or consistent cellular data. And it's got there's a significantly longer delay time. So any weather information or traffic information you get through cellular data is going to be even more behind. So you might see an aircraft on there and giving you advisory, but unfortunately it could be a substantial delay. So the last position you see is going to be, actually the aircraft's going to be further ahead on that trajectory. Same thing with weather. The weather's probably moved on substantially since from the position depicted on the radar. So it's there, but I wouldn't use it only as a last resort. It will give you um, you know, the METARs and the TAFs and that information as well, you know, if you're trying to look up airport information. But again, only works at fairly low altitudes, and I'd say it's best to be used on the ground before you take off, and use the ADS-B in or another source to get in-air information. GPS guidance with the EFB, situational awareness only. Don't use it as a sole means of navigation. It's in my experience has been very accurate for what it is, and I haven't had anything crazy as far as being really far off or having outages, but it is designed as a situational awareness aid, so you know, not to be used for navigation, but it does really help with situational awareness, and kind of as a last resort backup. You know, if you were to lose absolutely everything in IMC, you know, it could really get you out of trouble, and I would definitely want to rely on that over just making an educated guess in you know, absolute hard IMC. So some of the uses for the EFB: flight planning, pre-flight briefing, weather briefing. Um, it'll actually with ForeFlight, you can go through your whole pre-flight briefing, and it will actually keep a record of it, so you have a record that you had a weather briefing, and it pretty much has, I mean, it has a tremendous amount of weather information, and it's all specific to your route, instantaneous. It works really well. And then in-flight weather, you have the NexRad weather radar, lightning strike information. It's near real time, I think, is usually the term I hear regarding that, because they're with ADS-B in, it's decent, but there's still, I mean, potentially, you know, there could be a 10-minute delay. I suppose in extreme cases it could be even longer. Usually it's about 5 minutes. At least that's what I've seen, is about 5-minute delays, depending on how fast the weather system or the cell that you're dealing with is moving. You kind of have to bear in mind that what it's indicating, it's not perfect real time. So if you have a really fast moving storm, I mean, you could have a 10, 20 mile or more difference to be aware of. Charts. The amount of charts that you can keep in a EFB is unreal. I mean, you could have the entire continent in there or more, you know, every procedure right at your fingertips, and it works really well if you end up at an airport you weren't planning on being in. If you're flying near the edge of, you know, in the old days when you had paper charts, you know, if you were flying near, you know, I know up here in the Midwest, you know, if that set of charts, we were flying near the edge of where that chart, you know, that plate book was at, and then you find yourself wanting to go to a different airport. Either, hopefully, you have that other book, but if you didn't, you're kind of in trouble. You'd have to try to get a hold of ATC and get some information, kind of on the more emergency side of things, to figure out what you need, especially if you're flying, you know, an aircraft that's not a G1000 with all the chart information that's in there. So it's really nice. You have just a tremendous amount of information that can be stored and downloaded in there. You don't even need to rely on a GPS or internet signal, because you can download all that information there, and it just fits right in the searchable database right there on the tablet. So it's really great. Terrain avoidance, synthetic vision. This is a feature that not all EFBs have. A lot of these features aren't necessarily in every EFB. With ForeFlight, I know it's optional. I have it more for an emergency, kind of a, you know, last resort feature if I'm flying in hard IMC and you know, just were to lose everything, entire electrical system. Then I would have basically I'd have a, a artificial horizon, altimeter, airspeed, all that. Of course, it's all based off of the GPS, which is not a certified GPS, but it would definitely be better than nothing. And the terrain avoidance, it would, it kind of depicts a kind of a like artificial environment on the screen, kind of as a backdrop for the artificial horizon. I know some very rare, very few aircraft have it, usually more higher-end aircraft with a G1000. I've seen those have that where it actually kind of makes a animated depiction of the environment behind the artificial horizon. So pretty cool feature if you ever get to see that, but that's kind of how that works. So flight planning and filing, you get all the performance data, weight and balance. You upload all the information, weight and balance information for, well, you can do quite a few aircraft actually. I think I have about 25 in mine, and it works really nice. You can just go in, input your passengers, yourself, fuel, whatever baggage or cargo you're carrying, and it'll tell you if you're within the CG envelope, and it'll keep track of it too throughout the trip, your fuel burn. I know I haven't flown any aircraft like this, but I know there is a few aircraft out there that in certain strange situations, as fuel burns off, it can actually put you outside the envelope as far as CG goes. If you have the aircraft loaded improperly as the fuel burns off, CG changes a little too much. So this will do that as well, and calculate that depending on what version you have. I guess some of the basic ones might not do that, but filing a flight plan. You can file your flight plan right from the app, so you can input your destination, your alternates if applicable, and all your other information in, pick your altitude, and receive your briefing. Check over all your NOTAMs, and then everything looks good. You can go ahead and file, and it will file it with ATC, and you're done. So it works really well. You can do corrections or cancel the flight plan up to 47 minutes. Sometimes it's a little bit longer depending on the airport. If you're at a larger airport, prior to departure, of course, after 47 minutes, you can still cancel the flight plan, but you're going to have to call ATC. I know I've run into this before where everything's good and I file the flight plan, waiting for the aircraft to get back if someone else has it, and they're severely late, so I don't have enough time to get off the ground, and I have to cancel and restart it. So it's not the end of the world, but it's much easier to cancel it through the app than it is to try to call ATC. Sometimes it doesn't seem to quite go through to everyone. Pre-flight briefing. Just want to go over this real quick. There are record keeping requirements under 14 CFR 91.103 to get all available information pertinent to the flight, and generally, some of the old like Duets, the 1-800 weather brief is still out there. Duets is not, but they kind of meet that standard of record keeping, where there actually is a record that yes, I did my due diligence and checked the weather information before my flight. If anything unfortunately was to happen, you should have documented that you did your diligence. For flight, as an EFB, I know there's other EFBs out there that probably meet that requirement as well, but for flight will keep, I believe, for 180 days on file, record that you did get a pre-flight briefing. And everything pretty much that you'd get from 1-800 weather brief, except for that personal actually having, which is nice sometimes if you're feeling maybe less than 100% about the weather. ForeFlight's all electronic, so there isn't that human aspect, another person with experience to look things over. But other than that, you're pretty much going to get all the same information. And if you do the 1-800 weather brief online, I found that it's very similar information. The 1-800 weather brief can sometimes be a little bit, the graphics can be a little bit better, but otherwise, the ForeFlight stuff has got all the same information pretty much. So the in-flight weather monitoring, just want to go over a few things here as well. So the weather radar that you're going to see on here is regional NEXRAD. There'll be lightning and cloud tops, icing, and then all of the weather that, most of the weather information that you got on the ground, you can still get through the ADS-B in, and that's where all of the weather on this page is coming from, is the ADS-B in. Your local weather, TAFs, all that you should be able to receive from your destination airports along the way. But again, be aware of the delays in the information displayed. So this could be up to 10 minutes or more. If you look in the upper left-hand corner of the image on this screen, I have circled the 5:30 p.m. And that's the age of the image. You have to bear in mind that that's the age of the image when it was sent, or I'm sorry, when the tablet received that image. So the image may have been a few minutes old when it was first received. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner, 5:38. So this image here, when I took this, is actually 8 minutes old. So very, very important to remember that the weather information can be a few minutes old. And I know there's definitely several catastrophic accidents that have occurred with aircraft flying into severe thunderstorms because they weren't aware of that lag. So it's very, very, very critical to be aware of that. So charts, kind of like we touched on earlier, there can be thousands and thousands. I mean, you can have charts for the entire 48, lower 48, Canada, Alaska, and you can have all that downloaded. It just kind of depends on the capabilities of your EFB, your tablet. They also are, I believe I went over this, but the electronic flight bag can be a replacement for paper charts, so you're not actually legally required to carry those as long as you have current charts. They're not expired. If they're expired, then yeah, you can't use them. They're not approved. It's pretty easy to access them. That's one thing I like about, or one of the greatest features of this compared to the paper charts, is trying to thumb through those, or have little post-it notes or something like I used to have, and so you could find the charts that you want. No, you just enter in the airport identifier and you're there, and you get all the information you would want right there about the airport. Yep, like I said, use the paper, place the paper charts. Just got to make sure they're current, up to date. It's usually pretty easy as long as I have mine set for automatic. I just have to verify before I take off that they're current. But as long as it connects to my Wi-Fi at home, it just updates automatically. So traffic advisories. One thing I wanted to mention right away too is TIS, or Traffic Information System. So TIS can get information a couple different ways. Because it's monitored by radar, if for some reason there was an aircraft that did not have ADS-B out, which in the airspace I'm looking at right now, with the 30 nautical mile mode CVAL, they definitely need to be ADS-B out. But if for some reason it wasn't working, and they did have mode C, that you actually would get the TIS traffic. So you'd still get evidence of the aircraft showing up, or the traffic advisory for that. I've experienced that a couple times, and I actually would get a like a diamond shape rather than the little arrowheads that you see here. And that's because there's no directional information coming through, just the altitude and position. So yeah, ADS-B in. Yeah, if the aircraft doesn't have ADS-B, if the aircraft doesn't have ADS-B out, it's not going to show up, and you'd need ADS-B in to get the that traffic advisory information. Some aircraft, the G1000s, when I fly, I get TIS information through the G1000, but I will not get ADS-B out information because there's no ADS-B in those aircraft other than the one I bring with me. Some of the limitations, I kind of went over most of them, but again, if there's malfunctioning equipment, if there's malfunctioning ground equipment, of course ADS-B is tower-based. If there's any malfunctions, then you're not going to see the aircraft on here, so it's important to remember this is situational awareness. It's an aid. It can't be used exclusively to maintain separation. Delays, being it's ground-based and you're going through a couple of different systems before it gets back to you. There could be a lag time. Again, if you look up in the corner here, you got 450 for the time that my tablet received this information, and then 459 and it's the actual time. So for some strange reason, that's not very typical. I think it has a little bit to do with that it's I'm connected to the internet rather than ADS-B. The ADS-B is a lot quicker update rates, but that information is pretty old. I mean, you think about that was reported 22 seconds ago for that. If you look there, that I've kind of clicked on, showing the tail number, the altitude, heading, and speed. It says 22 seconds ago, but that information was received 9 minutes ago. So I mean, that aircraft could have moved significantly from that position. So there's things to be aware of when you're using this stuff. Terrain avoidance, synthetic vision, kind of touched on this earlier as well, but it uses basically an AHRS or a makeshift AHRS inside the tablet, if your tablet has that, or else some ADS-B in receivers also have such capabilities, and it kind of gives you that screen that I have there. It's basically an artificial horizon, heading indicator, altimeter, and airspeed. Kind of gives you all that information. And again, you really can't use it for navigational purposes, but situational awareness or an extreme emergency, it's better than nothing. So nice little thing to have as a backup. Oh, and if you have a Bluetooth headset, and like the Bose A20, and it has Bluetooth capability, you got to connect it to your tablet, you'll actually hear those enunciations. If you have an excessive sync rate, it'll also tell you, that you've got obstacle clearance issues, where if you don't make a correction, you will contact an obstacle. It'll tell you that obstacle ahead. It'll give you the position, how far away, altitude you are away from it. Let's see, what else will it tell you? I've noticed too, it'll tell you if you're on final approach. If it thinks you're on final approach, it'll tell you final approach and the runway number, which is kind of nice if you have lined up for the wrong runway for whatever reason. Maybe another chance to correct a mistake. So nice for situational awareness, especially if you have that Bluetooth capability where you can actually hear those announcements. I mean, otherwise it'll just show them across the screen. So in conclusion, the EFB, tremendous amount of information, very easy to access, especially in flight. You're not fumbling around looking for things. It's all right there in front of you, especially if you can clip it to the yoke, if you have that ability. Excellent source for situational awareness. Just know what the limitations are and how it all functions so that you don't take that information the wrong way and get yourself into a hazardous situation. Thanks for watching, guys. And I got a few references here if anybody's curious where the information came from. Have a good day.